Hey guys, welcome back to another video today. If you're new here, my name's Danielle and the name of this channel is This Little Light. And we aim to shine our lights into the world to help make it a little bit brighter. And you guys know that I can talk. I can share about what it's like being a dwarf, what it's like living with a disability. I can share about my life. But the one thing I can't share about is what it's like leaving my house and fearing that I'm going to be judged by the color of my skin. I'm white, I'm not black, and a way that I'm going to use this channel to shine light is to turn it over to one of my friends, Josie Fomé, and she is going to share with us today her experiences being a woman, being black, living in Africa, living in the States, and then now living in Canada, and what her experiences are to these racial injustices and these microaggressions that she constantly faces. And so I hope that you guys come away from this video educated, and every single person on this earth is a child of God and should be treated equally, and right now that's not happening. And so I hope this video encourages you to take steps forward in helping that become a reality. So with that, here's my interview with my good friend Josie Fomé. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So glad you guys are joining me today. And today is going to be super, I think, insightful and really good for you guys just to sit down and listen. But I am joined with my friend Josie.
Hi.
Hey, so Josie, I don't know if you know this, but you were actually my first black friend that I've had ever in my entire life.
What?
I know, right?
Yeah,
So
no, I don't think I knew that.
yeah, so there you go, surprise. But I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, and so I was just never around black people, and so I just never had a black friend until I moved to Montreal. And I guess we've now been friends for almost 4 years, which to me is crazy.
Has it been 4 years?
I
Wow.
think it's almost been 4 years. Yeah, that's crazy. Time flies. Um, so anyways, with that being said, I'm really thankful that you are here to kind of just shine your light on the different injustices that you face, and hopefully the people who are listening will just come away with this more educated and feel like they can speak up. So,
My pleasure. Yeah. I hope that I hope that I have something good to contribute.
oh, I'm sure you will. So we are super excited. So why don't we just get right into it? And I'll
Cool.
start with my first question, which is basically with everything that's been going on regarding injustice, police brutality, racism. How have you been feeling?
I think that when I really sit to consider it and to just kind of be in it,
Mhm.
obviously it's a lot. It's too much. Um, Especially in this time, the combination of the virus, the stay-at-home laws, and everything, on top of just this, just the movement that's been happening. It's been quote unquote waking up a lot of non-Black people. Because the thing is, Black people have been very aware of what's been happening forever, since the beginning of these quote unquote countries being, established. So the fact that now it's just, it's just being filmed and it's literally at like our disposal, in our hands constantly, it's
Mhm.
a lot. It's a lot. And every Black person you'll speak to will just be like, you know it's too much. We know it's too much. We're overwhelmed, but we also understand that, like, until there's tangible change, we can't fully or truly escape it, because we still gonna be Black.
That's
you
true.
know White people can log off, non-Black people can just be like, I'm tired of this. They can mute, certain things. They can decide to unfollow. They have that choice and that freedom, even though ultimately, at the end of the day, bottom line is, like, if one person or one group of people are struggling, everybody honestly is struggling. You just don't realize it. And so to see how, like, some people have just been so, a lot of people have been like, I've been silent for so long, but it's just because I didn't know what to say. And it's just like, you may look at that message, and when somebody says something like that and be like, oh, okay, that's super sweet. I'm glad you're actually, coming to terms with that. But when you really consider it, it means that, oh, somebody was murdered, right? And I just kept living my life. because I was uncomfortable or because I was fill in the blank, right? And when you really consider that, it's just kind of it's a nasty reality. It's a nasty truth. And it sucks. It sucks. Just recently. Now the thing is, like, you know, there's being Black and there's being a Black woman, right? Because recently, just yesterday, I believe, there was like this Tallahassee activist, this activist from Florida. She's Nigerian American who was found, right? She had tweeted about her sexual assault, and she was on the front lines for Black Lives Matters in Florida, and found dead, murdered, right? And so just the constant bombardment that Black people face, it's creating and shifting our realities and identities in ways that I feel as if we're not going to fully comprehend, you know, especially once we like get out of COVID and have a bit more freedom outside of our homes and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Well,
Surprise.
I think that's thank you for sharing how you're feeling. And I think that's something that's really important to remember, is that you can't just leave your house and cover up your skin color. And it's just
Right.
always there. And I think that's something that I always thought that I felt too, was that when I would leave my house, it was like, I can't cover up my disability, but I never took into consideration my white privilege about how, like, if I leave my house, I'm not going to fear for my life because of the color of my skin. It's important that we're talking about that so people understand.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also interesting to consider how it's like Black people across the board. So even in the disabled community, right? It's like, because you've got Black people there as well, right? And so to think that it's not just your disability that will cause people to like sneer and jeer and make fun and poke and, you know, be mean and hurtful, but it's also your skin. You're going to be racialized. You're going to be this and that. So I can't even imagine, at least for me, it's like I'm a Black woman. But like if you think of like somebody else and every other that they need to add after the Black, it's, my goodness, I can't fathom. I cannot fathom. Whether it's like a Black gay person, Black trans, Black disabled, like, you know, whatever it is, it's too much.
It is a lot, especially with social media too. It's just everywhere. And so I know that you lived in the U.S. before. So what are your experiences living there as a Black person?
Honestly, growing up in the States, I grew up in the South, and I wasn't really like too aware, or I wasn't really looking out for racism.
Okay.
And, you know, I grew up in the predominantly white areas as well. But the interesting is, I'm originally from Cameroon in West or Central Africa, depending on who you're speaking to. And when we moved here, we were still more or less part of the Cameroonian community. The majority of people on my soccer team were white. The majority of people in my classes were white. Everything else was like, the Black people that I would hang out with were Africans. They weren't really Black Americans, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so the issues between, like, you know, white people and Black Americans wasn't really something that I lived per se. I think in that like day, back in the day, it's not even that long ago, but like it was what, around the early 2000s, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was like in school and whatnot, what the struggle was being like African. The struggle that I really endured was like Black people making fun of like Africans, right? Because there's that dichotomy between like African Americans and Africans. And so everybody's like, oh no, your ancestors were slaves, my ancestors were not, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There is still that kind of like divide between the two communities. And so a lot of like people would just be like making fun of the fact that I was African. But when it came to like white people, honestly, nothing that I can say I was like, oh, this is really, really racist. Except, my goodness, there's always a but, right? I remember one time when I was, we were switching soccer teams every year. You know, you have to go to tryouts, and then you have to, you know, see if you could still make the team and whatnot. And I can't forget exactly what age this was. It was between U13 and U15. And for the longest time, I was with one coach who was he was amazing, super understanding with everything. He was just great and not racist. And then when we switched, there was this other coach who everybody, like, he was renowned. People wanted to be on his team. Players like wanted him to be the coach, and parents wanted him to be the players coach. So everybody really wanted to be on his team because he had results. I remember there was another Black girl on our team, and she was the goalkeeper. And I used to play defense the majority of the time. And one day the goalkeeper was like late. I think she was either late or she wasn't coming. It was very unclear. And the coach looked at me. He's like, okay, go ahead, go in the goal. And I'm just like, I've never played goalie before, coach. Like, I don't know what you want from me, but if you want to win, that's not the move I would make. And he's just like, no, it's okay. They'll just think that he essentially was like saying that he said that the opponent, the opposite team, will think that I am the regular goalkeeper, and so they'll be intimidated because the other girl was like a really great goalkeeper.
Yeah.
And she would like dive and do all those great things. And because of the color of my skin, it's just like, and white people obviously can't tell Black people apart. He's just like, okay, go ahead, just go in the goal, and they're not going to know the difference, and you won't even have to worry about it because they'll be too scared to shoot, right? And I'm just like, I mean, okay, but at that point, you just do what the coach tells you to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember I was just like, that makes no sense. And of course, that didn't work. They still got a goal in on me, and I think it even went in between my legs. It was pretty embarrassing, but like not as embarrassing as your ignorant coach thinking that because you're Black, people won't be able to tell the difference. Like my teammate, she was taller than me, first of all. There was like that huge difference. But just the whole situation but was very weird. And I've never forgotten it, obviously. But I think that was the most blatant racism I've ever seen. Anything else was never really to my face. As much as like my classmates were mainly white, there was still like, a lot of Black people and in the community and in the schools. And I don't know. Like I said, it wasn't something that I was picking up. The reason I'm hesitating is because I'm thinking of this one professor, this one teacher that I had who she just really didn't like me. I don't know why. I don't know if it was her being racist or if it was just like her not liking her job. It was probably a combination of the two.
Let's
You
go.
can never be too sure in the South. But she just said so many things. And of course, like, honestly, for me, I just let it roll off my shoulder because I was like, you're demented. So I'm not even going to take that seriously. But, it's in hindsight when you look back at situations like that, and you're just like,
Yeah.
this person went a little too hard. They went a little too extra. They did a little too much with me in particular, right? And so you start doubting yourself, even though in reality, it's their discrimination and their prejudice that's causing, this confusion and whatnot. So yeah, but that whole soccer incident, it was wild.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of reminds me a little bit what you said right at the beginning about how you faced more comments from like the African Americans than like the Black community in the States because you're from Africa. Were you expecting that when you moved to the States to be singled out like that?
I honestly had no expectations. I moved to the States when I was 5, so I was pretty young,
Mm,
and I didn't really know anything else.
mm,
All I knew was, like, say for instance, before I would leave my house, my dad would always tell me like to remember that, excuse me, he'd always remind me, be like, you need to remember where you come from, you're African, you're Cameroonian, you're from like this village or whatever, to just like remember my identity,
mm,
and to be like, oh, you need to keep in mind like you're not like American, right? I wouldn't say that I experienced blatant racism a lot, but my family members, my siblings, they did. I'm in the area where I was raised and grew up in South Carolina, and which surprise, surprise. um, and yeah, it's unfortunate, and that's an understatement.
It's crazy because not everyone's experiences are the same, but they're still experiences, and they still are injustices that a lot of people just aren't aware of.
I also think it's a lot of times it's the racism isn't always outright and blatant, and it's not, people with like white hoodies trying to burn people or lynch people. It shows itself, it manifests through small little everyday interactions, through microaggressions, through which, those I would say I experience, right? When people are always just like, oh yeah, oh my goodness. I remember this was when I was already in Canada though. I remember coming to school, and more or less every 2 weeks or a month or whatever, I change my hair because that's what keeps it healthy. And there's always like nice fun styles to play with and whatnot. And so every time somebody was like, oh, we're just gonna give you the nickname Chameleon because you're just always changing, and one week you're like this, another week you're like that. And if you're not thinking too much about it, you'll just be like, oh, that's cute, that's quirky. But it's also just like, they're playing on and touching on this issue of like, Black people and their hair, which is a huge thing because I'm sure you've probably noticed, or maybe not, all of the controversy around box braids, especially when it's like the Kardashians who are having certain hairstyles that usually Black people have. And whenever it's people like the Kardashians, and that's why it's not just white people that are guilty of this. It's really non-Black people, like everybody who's really not Black and who's not experiencing this, because they benefit off of the things that Black people get, like, how can I say, called out on or made fun of, right?
Yeah.
So, but like I said, by the time that I was like here, I was older, and I think I was more aware of like, all these little slight statements. And when you really think about it, it just shows that all of this is so ingrained in our culture and in our society. And we've got a lot of work to do. And it's so stupid. The idea that like one race is superior to another, especially the fact that race is a social construct, somebody just decided to make it up. It's just like, for people to adhere to that and to look at somebody differently because of something made up, my goodness, that's just the epitome of ignorance.
It's sad. It kind of like brings me into my next question. So because the murder of George Floyd occurred in America, all eyes are pretty much focused there right now. So since we're both living in Canada, and there'll be some Canadian viewers who are watching this, do you think that the racial issues that are so prevalent in the US are also present in Canada?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. This, as you've seen, people have been protesting all over the world. It's gone global because it's a reality literally everywhere. I think, once again, the only difference that I would say would be on the African continent, because you'll deal with a lot of people, you'll speak to a lot of people there, and they'll be like, oh, I don't understand racism. Because if you're constantly surrounded by like people who look like you're not going to think twice about it. That's the same thing that happens within African countries, right? If it's just Black people everywhere all the time, you're not even going to think about the fact that you're Black, because that's not even a question. It just is, right? But instead of racism, it shows up differently within the African continent, right? It shows up as tribalism. It shows up as colorism. It shows up as just there's still people who are marginalized and oppressed in different ways. But then also colonization is still very much real there, and the effects of it. And so if you go there, or I'll say my experience of having traveled to some of the countries is that as a dark-skinned person, I'm definitely treated worse than a light-skinned colleague or something like that, which is a reality that you have to deal with, and it's super frustrating, so many aspects of it. But just being here in Canada, first of all, Canada is America's cousin. Canada loves to pride itself on the fact that they're quote unquote nice, or that they're not quote unquote America, or like America, or they're better or whatever. Not realizing that like these countries are one and the same coin, different sides. Where Black people are being gunned down on the streets in America, it's Indigenous people here in Canada.
Yeah.
These countries were both born on the backs and the blood and the sweat and tears of Black and brown bodies. And for people to not recognize that or acknowledge that, or to think that Canada is better or, you know, in any way, again, ignorance. And it's willful ignorance, because in this day and age where technology is everywhere, you have access to technology, especially if you're privileged, for you to think that, oh, but we're not America, that doesn't fly and will not fly anymore, right? And it just goes to show that it's you deciding to remain comfortable in your little bubble. But it's not even comfort anymore, because you're hurting yourself and you're hurting everybody around you by continuing to be ignorant. And yeah, people don't realize that there are slaves here in Canada as well. There are Black slaves in Canada, here in Montreal, you know, not that long ago, you know, and it's one of those things that Canada is very good at sweeping things under the rug. And it's just like, nah, it's time to air all of that, air it out, because people are still dying. They are dying on the streets unjustly. And it is a reality for Canadians. It's a reality for Black Canadians. Black Canadians are also traumatized, just like Black Americans. Like, honestly, throw the whole thing away. It's time to restart.
Yeah. And it's very much like oh, we're not as bad as you, so we don't have this type of racism, and so we're a lot better. And I think even just from a Christian perspective, that like injustice is injustice to God, right? And like sin is sin, and one's not greater than the other. It's all bad. It's quite toxic for different countries and different people groups to be pointing fingers like that and bringing other groups of people down. Racism is very prevalent in Canada, and it is not just an American thing, is what you're saying. All right, so the last question I have for you is that, well, basically in the last couple of weeks, something that I've been learning is that it's not Black people's responsibility to educate us about these social issues. So these social issues, just like you just mentioned, like it's not an excuse for white people not to look this up, and this type of ignorance cannot continue if we want to get better and if we want to become more educated. I still think there's value in learning from people like you. So now, coming from that place, what are a few things that you would like to tell white people regarding next steps after learning about these issues?
I think the biggest thing is paying the people that are teaching you and educating you, because it takes time and energy. And sometimes as people speak about this, they're low-key being re-traumatized, because say, for instance, like thinking about that soccer story, it's like, these aren't things you don't want to think about, the fact that happened to you. You don't want to relive it. And in instances like these, where there is this kind of like awakening, everything just comes rushing back, right? Constantly talking about it, constantly seeing it, it's keeping it at the forefront of your mind when it's things that you're just kind of like, you know what, I just want to keep on trucking, you know? And honestly, being able to put your money where your mouth is really where we're at in 2020 and beyond.
I'd agree, yeah.
Because we realize that the way that these big corporations, the way that all these people in this society that we live in, this capitalistic society, it's all about money, it's all about finances. That's why there's been this wave of people being like, support Black businesses, support local Black people, whether it's Black bookstores, Black educators, literally everything, because you start realizing that you vote with your money, you vote with your finances. We say the richest man in the world now is Bezos, right? Because of Amazon, because with everything, everybody just keeps going to that. And then you start seeing what Amazon can do. That's a lot of power, right? That's a lot of power. And if people in power don't think that Black people need to have like the right to live, that's looking really bad for Black people, you know? And so that's why we like are urging so many people to be like, if you consider yourself an ally, be intentional with where you spend your finances. I think in terms of resources as well, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because as much as it's important to hear from Black people, the thing is, I'm not an activist. I'm just Black, you know? And my experiences, right, make it seem as if I am an activist, but I'm literally just speaking up because I've had to experience this. This has been the life that I've lived. And it makes it seem as if, you know, oh, I'm on the front lines or whatever, whatever. Nah. You speak to any Black person, they'll probably have a similar story, you know?
Yeah.
All this to say is there are Black people who are intentional in their activism, who are like actual activists, that like it's their paying job, you know, it's their life's work and calling, and they've written books and they're doing the work. And that's where you can like, you know, and the resources are out there, you know? So as much as it's important to speak to like regular Black people and Black folks like me, it's also really important to realize that the works, like people have been doing the work. Black people have been doing the work. There's so many resources out there, whether it's books, movies, what have you, right? Google is so free. And I don't want to like promote Google, any search engine that you're using, just right there, you know, and have these conversations. The thing is, these conversations happen around coffee tables, and they happen around in phone conversations, right? It's you having a conversation with your family members, with that questionable uncle, with, you know, the cousins that, you know, just think they're still having fun or just a joke, right? It's now on non-Black people to have those hard conversations with family members and friends that they know are a little, you know, Black people are tired. Because we've been speaking, it's not George Floyd that got Black people out. First of all, Black people have been out since the inception of America.
Yeah.
Talking about this is not right, but you know, 400 years later, and then you have fighting for integration and denouncing segregation. You know, the whole civil rights movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. What other movements do we need? We've been speaking, we've been fighting, we've been screaming. And obviously, as a Christian, I understand that this world foundationally is broken, and thus the people as well. But yes, I believe that my God is a God of justice. And that at the end of the day, he's going to come back to us working and fighting for the oppressed and the marginalized, and calling those people and inviting those people into our homes and having those conversations and welcoming them and being warm, and not treating them like strangers just because we don't understand or what have you, right? So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but all I would say is there is no excuse in this day of the Lord.
Yes, I agree. And I think what you were alluding to is watching this video and just watching videos is not going to cut it. Posting on Instagram and posting those catchy little thing like promotional things aren't going to cut it.
All of it. Sorry, there are flies and bugs. It's just flying all over. All of it is necessary, though.
Yeah.
It's like, the thing is, there has been a lot of, you know, shaming of people being like, oh, you know, if you're just doing this or if you're just doing that. No. I'm not here to shame anybody. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You know? And if yesterday, like there's been something going around on the interwebs where it's like, if yesterday you were saying, you know, all lives matter, and then today you're like, and then you found out that, oh wait, I understand why that's problematic. Is it too late to be like, nah, okay, I understand, Black Lives Matter? Is it too late to say that? No. That's the whole point of learning and educating. You can pivot, you can grow, you can unlearn and relearn, right? So all of it is necessary and important, whether your activism is online. The only thing is, I think what people are trying to say is, don't let it remain there, you know? Don't let it just be online. Branch out and continue to touch and reach out to the people that you touch in your lives and that you engage with. And the work continues in real life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, thank you for making that clarification, because I think that's where a lot of people are at least some different of some of my white friends that I've talked to, is our eyes are being opened for most of us, which is the first time. And I think there's a lot of shame that comes with this too, of not have, like, I wish I would have known sooner. I wish I would have done something sooner. Um, but kind of just like you said, like, if you're learning now, that's that's great, and it's just where to go from that. um
I mean, it's better. It still sucks because it's like,
it still sucks,
what
100%.
changed? You know, what is it? I'm sure like Black people really want to know, like, what was it about this moment that people are like, oh, wait, somebody's like dead, you know? Or was it the knee on the neck? Was it the hands in the pockets? Like, what was it? You know, like Black people are pissed. It took so long for, you know, people, especially throughout all this time. I'm sure there were many non-white people who considered themselves allies, right? But
I'm
we're
sure.
still just like, I don't want to step on any toes or whatever, because,
Mhm.
you know, it was still very uncomfortable for them. And it's just like, yeah, as much as it's better late than never, it's still like,
It's still hard, and it's
still
still,
side-eye it a little bit, you know.
yeah. And is there anything, any last words that you want to share? Anything that you want anyone who's listening to know?
I think that Black people are dope and doing dope things, and we deserve to live.
Amen.
um, and it's really, really, really important to check your bias and to do that work. And that work, it's individual and it's intentional, and it's deep, because you don't realize how deeply ingrained the bias is as a result of everything that we take in from our society.
Yeah.
So it's really, really, like, for all our believers out there, sitting in and asking the Holy Spirit to reveal things to you, because you will surprise yourself
Hmm.
on how biased you can be and how prejudiced you can be or have been. Um, and then, you know, I always talk about this and I love it. Thankfully, there's grace,
Mm.
the grace of God that comes and continues. Sometimes it's really frustrating because God is just so gracious, right? Because,
Yeah.
like, Lord, how can you accept, you know, the killer and the killed,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
The killer and the murdered, right? How can you, the murderer and the murdered, just, you know, if they choose to confess their sins,
Hmm.
right, and repent and turn, God says He accepts them, right? And that's definitely something that, like, I still need to sit and wrestle with and understand, because it's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard to understand, but it's not for me to be like, oh, it's not fair or whatever. Like, it's grace and it's God. So yeah, and then there are a lot of Black people out here just creating dope stuff and, you know, finding their outlets, which is one of the reasons why I decided to create the podcast that I have, because I was like, need to find a way to amplify our voices and to show that we have our stories and our stories are valid, and
Hmm.
we need to tell our own stories. Because if you leave it to the media, and if you leave it to, well, mainstream media, if you leave it to others, it's always going to be, oh, but what about Black on Black crime, or what about, you know, these Black people in the ghettos and stuff like that. It's always going to be half stories
Hmm.
based on lies. Because if you truly understood where and when ghettos started and how they started, you would realize that it's not what, you know, you've always heard of it. Or if you truly understood or heard stories, you know. And the fact that, like, we have to go through all of this for people to be like, oh yeah, Black people deserve to live, that's the problem, you
That
know.
is the problem. Yeah.
And people are like, oh, Black people have contributed so much to society and to culture. Even if I have not contributed a single thing, the very fact that I'm a human being in my life is worthy, and
Hmm.
I deserve to live. And for all the people who are like, but it's going to take time, it's going to take time, you have to understand that in this time that you want, people are literally dying.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that it has to take as much time as some people make it seem.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
believe that the people, whoever, whatever the powers that be, or whatever the case is, right? If the priority was really um, Black lives and just life in general,
Hmm.
they'd make it happen the same way that so many other things get passed so easily and sometimes quietly, you know? So keeping that in mind. But I'm thankful for the hope that we have in Christ, because without that, I have no idea how, like, a lot of non-believers do it. Like, what do you hold on to, you know? But yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know that I'm going to come away from this conversation just feeling more enlightened and just really grateful for this time that you've shared with us. And to all you guys watching out there, I hope that you are educated. I hope that you feel like you have some learning to do, that you need to relearn some things that you've had in your mind, that you go out and you have those tough conversations like Josie said. Like it's not going to stop here, but if you've started, that's great. But there's things that need to be done, because like she said, there's people dying. And something that I always say on our on this channel is that we all have a light to shine, and you get to shine it. I'm not going to shine your light for you. Josie's not going to shine my light for me. It's on you. And I think it's on us now to really take our lights and shine them on this, what's going on right now. So, Josie, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dee.
It was so much fun to catch up. And that's all we have for you guys today. I'm going to link some resources down in the description so you can check them out. But I'm praying for you all. Keep shining your lights, and we'll see you again next time on another episode of This Little Light.
Hey.
Oh, we should let the go.